Hey, thanks for joining me. So today I want to talk about a camera. It's a 35mm interchangeable lens rangefinder camera made by Canon called the L2. L2 is a great little camera. It's kind of a no-frills, very basic camera, but really has everything I need and really has just been a great camera to use. Now, I really didn't intend to get back into rangefinder cameras. If you've watched many of my videos, you've seen that I shoot Olympus Micro Four Thirds cameras. And I found this lens, which is a 35mm f3.5 light Sumeron. I found this on an aircraft gun camera that was on Facebook Market. It was really cheap. And I rescued this lens, and I was using it just adapted to the Olympus cameras. And then I thought, it'd be nice to have a rangefinder film camera to put this on. So I started looking around and came across this L2. Now, I used to be a Leica rangefinder camera shooter. My first Leica was a 3A, and I had a 50mm f3.5 Elmar in it. The 3A was made in like 1935. The Elmar was post-war because it was coated. But it was a great little camera. I really liked that, and that kind of led me into buying an M3, and then later on an M4 II. That's the Canadian-made M4, and a winder for it. And I had a 50mm f2 Summicron. I had a 35mm f2.8 Sumeron with eyes for the M3. Had a 90mm f2.8 Tele Elmarit, and I had a 135 Elmar. Also had a Leica M1, which is kind of like an M3, but there's no rangefinder, just has a viewfinder. And on the front of that, I mounted a VisaFlex 2, and with that, I could mount on that a 200mm Telet, Lights Telet, and a 300mm kill fit lens. And so that was kind of my outfit while I was shooting rangefinder cameras. But when I kind of got back into photography, I started up with the Olympus Micro Four Thirds. Like I say, I found this lens and really wanted to find a rangefinder body for it, and so this is the one I settled on. So the L2 is a camera made by Canon back in the 50s. It's a really neat camera. Like I said, it's a no-frills, real basic camera, but it's got really everything I need. And I think it's for someone getting started in rangefinder photography, this is a good, affordable choice. So anyway, I'm going to put this on the workbench here where I have a camera set up above. You can look down at it and talk about this L2. And I have two of them now. So talk about the L2s and maybe a couple other Canon cameras that I have, and kind of go through the history of it and why I settled on this one. I think you'll find that if you're looking for a 35mm rangefinder camera to get started with, this really is a good choice, and they're pretty affordable. So let's take a look at this on the workbench and let you see all the features of it, and I'll catch up with you after that. Hey, before we get started looking at this camera on the workbench, I've had a number of people ask me about setting up either a Patreon account or a Buy Me a Coffee account or one of those things. And I was kind of surprised. Something I really hadn't thought about doing, but I've had so many people ask about it that I've decided to go ahead and do that. So I've got an account set up with Buy Me a Coffee. If you would like to buy me a coffee, I would greatly appreciate it. The proceeds from that will go towards, building this channel more. And so if you are inclined to do that, I would greatly appreciate it. Okay, this is the Canon L2. Now, the L2 was made between late 1956 and late 1957 is when they were produced. There was only 7,350 of them made, from what I understand. And yet they're relatively easy to find on eBay. Now, if you buy one of these, you're probably going to get it out of Japan. But as I've mentioned in other videos, I haven't had any real problem buying from the Japanese buyers. They've always been really easy to work with, and the prices for shipping are a little high, but they ship generally with FedEx, and it comes usually pretty fast. And so again, just like any eBay seller, if you're choosing your sellers that have really high ratings, like 98% or better, then you're generally just not going to have too much trouble. So this is the Canon L2. Now, again, like I mentioned, this is a very basic camera. You notice there's no self-timer on it. If we look close here, you can see that it has a 500th of a second as the top shutter speed. It has flash sync. You can see there's a sync socket here, but This does not switch between X sync and flashbulb sync like some of the other Canon cameras do. It's just focal plane flash bulbs only, so if I want to use this with a flash, I'd either have to modify it to work with electronic flash or use a flash gun that used flash bulbs, which I'm probably not going to do. This camera springs from the 5 series, the 5T, which looks very similar to this, but the 5T doesn't have a wind lever. It has a trigger that sticks down from the bottom. That's what the T stands for, and you pull that trigger across and that winds and cocks it. The L2 was, if not the first, one of the first that had a wind lever. The Canon Leica thread mount cameras before that used knob wind. So these up until this camera, or this 5 series cameras, all the Canon cameras looked very much like a bar neck style Leica. You know, when you wind the knob and take a picture. And so the L2 took the rangefinder screw mount Leica concept to kind of a new level. It does maintain the same front knob for the slow speed, so if you want to use speeds between a 30th of a second and 1 second, you set this to 30-1 here, and then on the front dial here, you can see there's 30 and 15 and 8 and 4 and 2 and 1, and actually a time setting if you want to lock the shutter open. So your slow speeds are on the front, and if you're setting a speed faster than a 30th of a second, you set it up here. And the shutter dial, as you can see, it does turn. So you have to make sure your finger's not touching it or something when you press the release button. Has an accessory shoe. The rewind knob is just pops up when you push this lever forward, and you can rewind your film. And the reason I bought this camera, one of the main reasons, with this 35mm Sumeron that I had picked up, I needed something that had a 35mm viewfinder, and this does. So you can see this dial here, there's a little roller back here on the back you can turn, and it switches between 50 for 50mm lenses, 35 for the 35mm lenses, and RF. And RF is a 150% magnified view. So if you're using a separate viewfinder on the top here with, say, maybe a telephoto lens, you could set this on RF for critical focusing. Sometimes on the 35mm setting, you know, the image is not magnified very much, so things are kind of small, and if I'm not sure my focus is exactly right, I can switch over to this real quick, fine-tune my focus, then come back to 35 and view. So it's a really neat little camera, just really basic. This also, the early Canons like this were like a screw mount Leica. You had to take the bottom off to put film in it, and the film slid in from the bottom. There is no back door. This is just sealed up. And so loading film in these is kind of clumsy. The M Leicas maintain that bottom loading. They added a back door that's kind of in the middle, which helps, but it's still comparatively clumsy. This is kind of neat. You've got a latch here on the bottom. You notice it actually says model L2 here on the bottom. There's a latch you flip up and turn. As I turn this, you'll notice this little tab right here is going to retract. You see it pull back in there. See? As I turn it, it comes in and out. So what that does is that clears this back door latch to come down. So this actually, when you close this up and you lock it, you can't accidentally open the back door, which is nice. Once you open this up, it's like a very conventional 35mm, like an SLR type loading. Put your film leader in the take-up spool, pull it across, put your film cassette in over here, and wind it enough to make sure your film's properly started. Close the back door, turn this latch to secure the back door latch so it can't open. Your film counter actually has to be manually set. There's a little, you can see a little knurled roller sticking out here. So you can turn this to the number of frames. So if I put a 24 exposure roll in here, I can set this to 24, and it counts down. As I take pictures, it's going to go 23, 22, etc. It's going to wind to 0. So it is a countdown film counter. So it's just a real basic little camera, no frills. The top shutter speed is a 500th of a second. Maybe that could be an issue for some people if you're trying to shoot really fast film in bright sunlight. I really haven't had any problems with it, but if I I guess if I found myself in a situation where I needed that, I could throw either a polarizer on, or since I'm shooting black and white, I could throw a red filter on, or yellow even, or you could even get a neutral density filter, and that way you could set a wider aperture if you wanted. Now I like this camera so much that, and I got this really inexpensively because it was on eBay, and it was from one of the Japanese sellers, and it was just a kind of a funny deal. The camera's got some corrosion. You can see under the wine lever here there's some corrosion, and there's some different places where it has some. You can see in between here there's a little bit. There's also a ding kind of back here on the corner. There's a little bit of corrosion up here. So it's not bad, but it had enough stuff like that people weren't bidding on it, and I got it, I don't know, it was like $28, $24, something like that. I got it really cheap. So the shipping was about the same as the price of the camera. And but it's been a great little camera. I didn't really have to do anything to it. It was pretty much ready to go. Then I liked it so much, I saw this one, not with this lens, it was just the camera body. And it had a problem, it doesn't have the ding, you notice. It had a problem with the shutter, the second shutter curtain. So there's two curtains, one opens and comes across, and the second one comes across and closes. And the second curtain was crooked. And that usually indicates that one of the cloth tapes that pulls the curtain across was broken. And so it sold really cheap. I got this, I think, for like $11 or $13 or something like that. I got it really cheap. And when I got it here and opened it up, the curtain tapes weren't broken. One had just kind of jumped off a roller, and had been knocked off one of the guide rollers. And the camera inside was just beautifully clean, recently lubed. The rangefinder and everything was perfectly calibrated. I think what happened is someone did a CLA on this, and then somehow in putting it back together, they knocked the curtain off its roller. And then when they discovered that, once they got it closed up, I think they either just didn't want to open it back up, or they may have thought maybe the curtain tape had broken and they just didn't want to mess with that, so they sold it cheap. And that's kind of a presumption, but the evidence kind of points in that direction. And so this one's in really, pretty nice shape. It has had a recent CLA. The only real thing about this one is, I don't know if you can really see it, but looks like somebody cleaned the viewfinder window with their shirt tail or their tie way too many times. Doesn't really seem to affect the view through the viewfinder, but it is kind of marked up. Anyway, the L2s are really nice, basic camera, no frills, but they really just do about everything I need to do. And, there are other models that are fancier. Also have a Canon 7. And the 7, this actually has a Russian lens on it, which is another story. But the 7 has a bigger, brighter viewfinder that's parallax corrected, which is nice. Also has a selenium cell meter. There's another version called the 7S that has a little round thing here, but doesn't have this big thing going across. It's just got a round thing. It's the CDS cell meter, which has a battery. These also, you can switch between different sets of frame lines. So there's 35, 50, 85, and 100, and 135 frame lines. And they're actually, when you look in the viewfinder, you can see those frame lines that are projected into the view, and then as you focus, those frame lines adjust for parallax. It's kind of nice, but the 7s, and as I mentioned, these are actually a good camera that some people like to buy because they don't sell for very much. I think a lot of people think that they're just kind of ugly compared to the 5 and 6 series. And this big meter thing on there, I don't know. And you'll notice there's no accessory shoe on here. The 7S does have an accessory shoe, but the 7 doesn't. So some people think it's just kind of ugly. And so these don't sell for very much money often. But anyway, the L2 I really liked. It's just a real basic camera, and they have served me really well. I think if you're looking for a rangefinder camera to get started, so there's the L2 and there's another one called the L3 that's just like this, but it has no flash sync at all. And then there is the L1, and all these L series spring from the 5T. The L1 looks more like the 5. It has a folding rewind crank. It has 1,000th of a second. I don't remember if it has a self-timer or not, but it has lever wind instead of the trigger. And they go for a little bit more. You can buy these L2s on eBay right now. They're, right above or below $100, depending on who has it and the condition. So you're not going to spend a tremendous amount of money. That's, again, just for the camera body. And you know, there's just a lot of value in that for that price, you know, in terms of getting a rangefinder camera. You know, you could buy a Russian camera for less money, but frankly, the Russian cameras don't hold a candle to these Canons in terms of quality. And I've repaired both these Canons, and I've repaired Leicas, and I can tell you that the Canon takes no backseat at all to the Leicas in terms of quality of construction and work and craftsmanship. These things are just beautifully made. They hold up really well, and they're just as repairable as a Leica. In fact, these are actually easier to work on than a Leica. You literally, I'm not telling anyone how to repair a camera here, but if you had to get to the shutter, you take the 4 lens mount screws off, take the lens mount off, be careful, there's some shims underneath it. There's 2 screws hidden underneath this, and then there's 4 screws on the outside here. So you take those 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 screws out, open the back door, and the whole back door and this whole front section just lifts off, and the shutter's exposed. I mean, I can literally be inside one of these working on the shutter in 5 minutes, which is just, you're not even going to come close to that with a Leica, not anywhere close. So it's a really easy camera to work on, and again, like I said, they're just really beautifully made. It's kind of hard to go wrong with one of these. Anyway, if you're looking for a good user rangefinder camera, I think the L2 is a really good choice. Well, there you go. That's the Canon L2. A great little Leica thread mount rangefinder camera made by Canon. Canon, I think, you know, took the Leica screw mount concept and took it way beyond where Leica took it, actually approaching some of the things that you find on the M cameras with their Leica screw mount bodies. Anyway, great little camera. If you're looking for something to get started with on a 35mm rangefinder camera, I don't know that you can do too bad with any of the L series or the 5 series, or even the 6 series. They're just a bit more expensive. Or 7s. Actually, what's funny is the 7s are cheaper than the 6s, and I think it's just because while they do more, they're kind of bigger and uglier. I mean, they're ugly. They're just not as. It's kind of like the M5 Leica versus the, you know, the M4s and the M6. The M5 was bigger and bulkier, and people just didn't like it. And I think that same thing kind of translates to the 7. But they made a lot of the 7s. I mean, it sold relatively well, and so they're pretty available. And the 7 is also a great choice for a starter camera, and you can often find them really at really good prices. Anyway, so that's the L2. If you have any thoughts or comments, please don't hesitate to leave me a comment. I always love hearing from you. And as always, thanks for watching.